Has your mix ever felt one-dimensional or crowded and you just can't figure out why? You've EQ'd, compressed, added effects, but something still feels flat. What if the problem isn't what you're using, but where your sounds are placed? This is one of the most overlooked skills in music production, and it can totally hold your mix back. So I'm gonna keep it simple. Let me show you some of the strategies I've learned about panning so that you can add more clarity and depth to your mix. Let's do it. And before we dive in, we need to know exactly what panning is and does, because while most producers know what it is, many people don't use it to its fullest potential, and this can be a reason why your mix sounds one-dimensional or crowded. So to clear up the basics, panning allows you to position a sound in the stereo field, so either more to the left, more to the right, or more in the center. So if something's panned to the left, it will be playing on the left speaker, and if something's panned to the right, it'll play on the right speaker. This can help create space, clarity, and a more immersive sound overall. But why would we want to do this? You can think of panning like setting a dinner table. So for example, if we have all this silverware and dishes and glasses and stuff like that, and we take those and set it all in the middle of the dinner table, all in this big pile, then it's gonna be a big mess. There's gonna be glass everywhere and it's gonna suck. But when everything on the dinner table is spread out into its designated places, everything spread out evenly across the table, it's balanced, it's organized, right? The same thing with panning. Separation creates order, and that's exactly what panning does. It separates elements across the stereo field, so your basses, your drums, your kicks, etc., and spreads them out so each element has its own space. And you might be like, well, doesn't EQ and leveling do this? That's true, they do that as well. But the thing is, leveling and EQ work horizontally, right? They separate elements by height and frequency, but panning works horizontally, right? So it's like unlocking a third dimension in your mix other than leveling and EQing. So we'll go into this in more detail in a little bit, but the kick drum, for example, might be right in the center of your mix. Usually that's what you want. Then you might have some certain effects that are spread out to the left and right, and then maybe some atmospheres. And so generally you want to think of panning like this. The more low frequency a sound is, so this could be a bass, a kick drum, etc., those sounds should be right in the center. So this could be the kick, for example. But the more higher up a sound is in frequency, such as hi-hats, effects, atmospheres, these can be generally panned out more to the left and right. And one more thing, as you can see here, if we have an effect on the left, we want to think of panning as like a scale. So we want something balancing it out on the right as well. Because if we just had an atmosphere or an effect only on the left channel, it's going to sound a little bit lopsided and awkward. And so now that you know this, I'm going to show you exactly how to use panning to make your mixes feel more three-dimensional and professional. Let's get into it. So now let's look at some basic examples of panning in context. Here's a simple project I made. So as you might hear, I have this shaker playing in the track. And the thing about the shaker is that each individual sample that this loop is made out of doesn't have panning. Of course, if you play one of the samples, it might have some natural stereo variation, like one of them is panned to the left just naturally, but overall these samples are more in the center of the mix. And we can use panning on these individual notes to create a more separated, dynamic type of sound. So let's do that. So in FL Studio, the technique I like to use is this graph editor here. While we're highlighted on the shaker, we can go click on this icon, and this is going to open the graph editor. From here, we can select panning, and you can see these purple lines on each individual note, right? Depending on if you drag it up or down, this indicates if the note is panned to the right or to the left speaker. So just for an example, I'll drag it down. That's on the left. That's on the right. And what we can do is strategically hand these notes to the left and right to create that dynamic feeling. And so I'll do this for each individual one here. So this one, and then the final one. So just so you can hear it a little before and after, this is what it sounds like before panning. And this is what it sounds like after panning. So if you're on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, you're probably not going to be able to hear this, but if you're on speakers or especially headphones, you'll definitely be able to hear that. And so just that simple thing, if you apply this to your tracks from now on, that can make it feel so much more dynamic, so much more separated, and just spread out, right? All right, so I just added these simple chords here. They sound like this. And here's what they sound like in the track. And really there are two layers here. So we have pad layer 1 and then a pad layer 2. And you can hear when we play the full track with both of these pad layers playing, it feels like it's fighting with the lead a little bit. It's taking up its space. And of course, the first thing we could do is just turn these down or EQ them, right? But what if we used panning to separate both of these layers from the lead so that the lead stays front and center while these are more atmospheric and to the sides? So we can use the panning knobs here. I'll pan this one to the left and then this one to the right. And this is what it sounds like now. So like I said, now we have that lead front and center, it's the spotlight, and then these pads are more off to the sides and separated. You can see that I'm generally keeping these the same level, and that's because you want to look at panning almost like a scale. Generally, if something's panned to the right, for example, you should probably have something else balancing that out on the left channel as well. Otherwise, the mix can feel a little bit lopsided and a little bit awkward. So a little before and after. This is before panning. So without panning these layers to the left and right, once again, they're right in the center. So here's an after. So another thing we have in this track is this background drum loop that I added. And it sounds really nice when it's layered with the lead and the bass. But once again, because this bass is directly in the middle, which is what we want, as well as this lead, this drum loop is going to clash because of that, because it's also in the center. So what if we take each of these individual hits here and slightly pan them to the left and right to once again create that more dynamic, separated feeling? So I'm just going to click on this small icon here and make unique for each one of these hits. So this one can be slightly to the left, this one can be a little to the right, etc. And we can just repeat the process. This is without panning. And this is after panning. So just that slight separation by panning it to the left or the right can make the mix feel more clean. So let's play it in the track. So now that we've done all this panning and stereo separation, we need to make sure our mix is still compatible in mono. So basically just making sure it's compatible with phones, clubs, etc. What we can do is enable the stereo separation properties in FL and make sure this is turned all the way to the right. This makes it completely mono. Yeah, everything sounds good to me. This one's a little bit older. I made it in 2021. I was just kind of experimenting with this project. It's very harsh and aggressive. But anyway, we'll specifically be looking at this guitar right here. This is what it sounds like. Now the thing about this is that we have 3 layers of the guitar. We have this one. We have this one. Slightly different tone. And then this one. And in this project, we have this very harsh synth arpeggio, which is right here. And this is supposed to be front and center. But what about the guitars? The guitars are also pretty much front and center. So with that being said, what if we take each individual layer of this guitar and pan them left and right? So for the first one, I'm going to hard pan this left. The second one, I'm going to hard pan it right. And then maybe for the third one, we keep this directly in the center just for that extra reinforcement. So a little before and after. This is before. After. You get this very wide, almost lush type of sound. And now combined with the lead, now they're clashing less because you have the lead, front and center, and then these guitars to the left and to the right. It's creating separation, space in the mix. And we can play with the whole track once again. So this is a very common misconception when it comes to panning. So for the example, I have this guitar loop right here. And And let me quickly render this out into audio. There we go. So now we have the guitar as an audio loop. And many people think that if we take a guitar loop, for example, and then we take the exact same guitar loop but make a clone of it, and this could be for any sound, by the way. And for the first one, we pan it all the way to the left, and the second one, we pan it all the way to the right. Many producers think that this will make the sound wider, right? Because we have one pan to the left and one pan to the right, just like in the previous example. But if we listen to it, it doesn't sound much different from when we had the first one, but in the center. It sounds no different. So what's going on here? Really, because we have two of the exact same sample, just literally a duplicate of it, and one is panned to the left and the other to the right, all we're doing to this is just increasing the volume. So for our ears to perceive something as wide, there needs to be some sort of delay or something like that. And with that being said, if we take the second guitar sample and we delay it by just a few milliseconds. So here's a before and after. This is before we moved this one. And this is after. Can you hear the difference? So like I said, for our ears to perceive something, there needs to be some sort of delay between the sounds. This is called the Haas effect, by the way. But better yet, instead of using the exact same sound and just delaying it, what if instead we make another guitar loop with a slightly different tone? So now we have the first original guitar loop and then the second one. So this is what they sound like both in the center. But now if we pan the first one to the left and then the second one to the right, this is what it sounds like. And this is without any delay on the sound whatsoever. So we get that wide sound because the first one is a different tone than the second one, and we're panning them both to the left and right. So I just wanted to clear up that misconception. Instead of just duplicating a sound and panning them to the left and the right, maybe do a different take of a guitar, for example, or do a different tone of a sound. That way you can get that wide sound, or even just delay them, do the Haas effect. Here's a simple bass house, tech house type of project I made. By the way, if you want this project and you also want to work one-on-one with me to take your music to a professional level, check the first link in the description. I think you'll like it. Anyway, in the project, we have these little ear candies and details and synths, such as these ones. And these little beeps. So I was thinking we just kind of go through the project and intuitively pan some of the elements to create a more dynamic sound using all the stuff that we covered earlier. So for example, this pluck right here, it's pretty much directly in the center and it's not separated whatsoever. So I think it would be cool to automate the panning slightly to make it pan left and right. And I only want this to be very subtle. So now this is what it sounds like. And we could probably do the same for the second one. Instead of going from the right to the left, we go from the left to the right. So together, get this more ear candy type of sound. And let's play it all together. Another thing I have are these vocals. So what if we pan some of these individual notes? So we'll take the auto pan, and that way it shifts from the left side to the right side very subtly. So we can turn up the amount and play around with the rate and the phase and stuff. Yeah, that's perfect. It's like every individual note is on a different ear. This will just separate it a lot more. Yeah, that's good. It's a very, very subtle difference, but just these small differences can upgrade your tracks. Alright, so one more stereo trick, and this is my favorite. This is a project from my drum and bass video. So you have the super wide drop with very lush synths. But the key here is, in the build-up, it slowly goes mono. And then when the drop hits, it opens back up into stereo. Let me play it. So especially if you're on headphones, you should be able to hear it slowly go into the center during the buildup, and whenever it drops, it finally opens back up into stereo. And to do that, on the main channel here, I have this utility, and I'm automating the width of this utility to go down and then back up whenever the drop hits. So the more down it is, the more mono, and vice versa. So just for the example, we can make this go completely mono in the buildup. And this trick can be used just to create more contrast between the buildup and the drop to make your drop sound more rich and bigger. So definitely go and apply this to your own tracks. It's very simple to do. So as you can tell, panning is the way to get more clean mixes as well as a more dynamic sound. I appreciate you for watching. And by the way, if you want to, please subscribe. It would help me retire my parents. You can click that subscribe button down below. And also, if you want to, check the first link in the description to work one-on-one with me, get a ton of resources, sample packs, and take your music to a professional level. Anyway, I will see you in the next one.